To put it in language that you all understand, this is start number 2 of In Goal Radio. The founders, Kevin Woodley and David Hutchison, are standing by. I'm Darren Millard, and we are very excited to follow up our debut podcast that featured Roberto Luongo of the Florida Panthers on a car ride with Woodley and Sonia DiBiase from CCM Hockey. Today, a couple of conversations featuring people that are just in love with the position. Vintage Goalie is an apparel line, but Matt actually got a start in the goaltending side of things, designing equipment. What goes through somebody's mind when they're coming up with a pad graphic or that shape of a shell for a mask? Matt takes us through that process. But up first, we lean on the experience of Mike McKenna, and there is a whole lot there. Born just as the New York Islanders were finishing off their run of 4 straight Stanley Cups, McKenna comes out of the St. Louis minor hockey program. He is a decade and a half into his professional career, and you think there'd be a lot of stories from that. But wait, this season has served up something he's never been through before. On the heels of back-to-back appearances in the Calder Cup Finals, McKenna has played for the Belleville Senators all the way up to the Ottawa, Vancouver, and Philadelphia National Hockey League organizations. And right now he's on his bye week, but took some time to spend with In Goal Radio. Take you back to July 1st, free agency day in the National Hockey League and the hockey world, and John Tavares signs with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it takes everybody's attention away from Mike McKenna signing on with the Ottawa Senators organization, and little did we know that that would equal or at least challenge John Tavares for the storyline going into 2019 and the midway point of this National Hockey League campaign. And Mike joins us on the podcast with Kevin Woodley and David Hutchison. Darren Millard with you. Mike, first of all, what's this season been like through signing with Ottawa, being in Belleville, called up to the NHL, and then spending time with Vancouver and Philadelphia as well?
Unexpected. Can't say that I went into July 1st expecting to wear 4 jerseys by midpoint of January. But I guess anything's possible, right? So I appreciate that intro. I mean, being mentioned in the same phrase as John Tavares, man, that's great. I don't think many people were planning the Cup Parade in Ottawa when I signed, but you know, I was pretty excited about it. So it's been an odd year to say the least. But it's also been great to, spend the most amount of time in the NHL that I have since, a decade ago. So, it's been really good in that way.
How have you been able to balance the hockey side of things with the taking care of your family and your girls?
It's been a tightrope, because truthfully, taking care of my girls really has been my wife's job and not mine, which is tough because we've always been a tag team with this. Around the house, I've done a lot of cooking. I try to do everything else I can. And I haven't been able to do that all season. Right. So I've been gone since October 29th. And it's been a big challenge. And, I'd be lying if I'd say there weren't tears shed on every aspect, it seems like, along the way. But when you sign up to do this job, it can happen. And so you just try to put your head down and find whatever positives you can, find whatever timeline that's going to be the next time you see one another, So we've just been doing our best with it.
Does it ever affect your game?
I don't think so. I mean, I just, when I go to the rink and I get on the ice, that's kind of my happy place. And that's where I don't think about family when I'm trying to stop the puck, right? But, I think there is something to be said, though, for being in your happiest place and playing your best. I know in the past, for me, that's always been the case, that my happiest years have been when I've played my best at the same time. So you have to try to find happy in any situation you're in, even if you're not together with your family. You've got to try to find a way to keep it fresh and to try to, find smiles and little things along the way to keep you going.
So let's bring you present day. You're on a bye week currently with the Philadelphia Flyers, and where are you? Like, what's happened, and what do you do during this bye week?
I'll give you the good story on this one yesterday. Started off the day in Montreal. We finished up our last game in Montreal. We won, I guess, Saturday night. So yesterday I woke up, I hopped the train from Montreal to Ottawa to retrieve my car, which had been sitting in the security parking lot of the Canadian Tire Center for a little over 2 weeks. And my worst fears were true, that my battery was dead, my car was snowed in, and I had a flat tire to boot. So the flat tire was the big surprise. So I had to back that sucker right into the bay behind the arena, get out the air compressor, change a tire, try to fill it up. Long story short, I ended up at Canadian Tire, and the fine folks there, $350 later, and a new battery and tires fixed, got me on the road within a couple hours. So hopefully they didn't sabotage my car, being a former Senator player and leaving. But I think they took some pity on me. So yeah, hit the road, drove to Belleville, again, where my family's been. That's about a 2.5 hour drive. And the roads weren't great yesterday, pretty big snowstorm, but thankfully they weren't terrible. So I got here last night, and now it's time to take 5 days with family and forget about hockey for a while.
The glamour of the NHL, eh, Mike? It's all just, luxury hotels and first-class flights.
I mean, some of the boys are in the Bahamas and Jamaica, so yeah, I guess it is for some. But that's just the way it works, though, right? When you have a family and kids, all I want to do is see my family. That's all I want to do. I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to be on a beach sipping a Mai Tai or something, but I just want hugs from my girls at this point, And so we were going to do a trip to Great Wolf Lodge and enjoy that like we did last year in Dallas over All-Star break, which was really cool. But when you've been away for as long as I have, you don't want to chase your tail and be traveling around, especially with kids that are 2 kids under 6 that, you stick them in a car and they could go bonkers. Right. And no matter how good the things are on their iPads, it may not be worth it.
Walk us through some of the logistics, Mike, because we've seen, I think people assume that you guys get heads up or what's coming or where you're going. I got a text message the other day from an NHL player saying, "Hey, do you want a scoop? This guy just got traded." And I'm like, how the hell do you know this? He's like, I'm playing Fortnite with him, and he just got traded. By the time that second text came in, it was official. Literally a minute and a half of notice before it goes public that you've been traded. How did you find some of these things out? Because I think a lot of people assume you're more in on the loop than you end up being often.
Well, I'll give you a great example. The initial trade when I went from Ottawa to Vancouver, I was totally blindsided by it because there hadn't been, there was no talk of that at all. We weren't close to trade deadline. I mean, I felt like I'd done everything that I could, and in doing so, it probably kept me in Ottawa, right? They didn't have to go searching earlier. And so I'd been pretty happy with how things were going. And then I just got, like I say, just blindsided. I took morning skate and I'm eating lunch in the players lounge in Ottawa. And I get called in with, my goalie coach, Pierre Grew, calls me into the office with the assistant GM, Peter McTavish. And yeah, you've been traded. Okay. To Vancouver, across the hallway. So it was surreal, and 5 hours later I was dressing for another team. But, for us, it was really tough because my family had just driven in the day before, and we were going to have 6 days in a hotel together. And so I had to pack up a whole hotel room that we basically moved into. And man, if I'd had to play that game, man, I don't know how that had gone because I had no rest. I'd had all the emotional aspect of it and trying to pack things up, and it was surreal. And then next night go to Montreal and back up another game. And yeah, you just never know with this stuff. And then 2 days later, I'm having coffee with Ian Clark and we're talking about the future with Vancouver and stuff. And then claimed, what? Clarky, come on, man, stop messing with me here. No, Philly. I'm like, no, okay, now I really know you're messing with me because I didn't know they'd had another injury problem at all, right? They weren't even on my radar of a team that could have possibly claimed me. And then, lo and behold, there were actually 2 teams that put a claim in. I find out later, but yeah, get on another plane and off you go. So I've just been living out of a suitcase and a little bag for an awful long time here.
One question we get from a lot of people is what's going on behind the scenes when you're traded. You've given us a really interesting glimpse, but it's probably a very different one. Not often do you traded to the team across the hallway. what's happening behind the scenes if you're on the road and you're moved to another team? What about all your stuff that's left behind in another city, in a rental apartment or a home that you own? How does it get to where you're going on the road, or to where your new home is? How your family looked after? Who's got to pay for all of that? What's it like?
An NHL transaction, they've got to take care of all that stuff. But I was already on recall to Ottawa, but I'd been in a hotel for 60 days, but hadn't been given a housing letter, which is a whole nother story. But in any case, so I'd been in a hotel. And so I basically had been on the road for 2 months anyway. And my initial recall, I was on the road with the American League team. So for me, it wasn't terribly difficult to go to another club. And I just sent my family back to Belleville where they'd been, because that's my daughter's in school. So we can't keep moving her all around without knowing exactly where we're going to be. And even now it's still, somewhat in flux, right? Until you actually get a housing letter and know you're going to be somewhere. So, thankfully though, there's a lot of protections in the EBA that have been outlined by the NHLPA that take care of this stuff. If you have to be your family, if you have to break leases, those things are pretty much accounted for. If it's an AHL transaction, we still have protection. They're not nearly as good as they are with the NHL. But I'll give you a great example. I mean, if you get traded in the American League, let's say, 2 months of your rent up to $2,100 is covered by the team that you're going to. So at least there's a little bit of protection, but a lot of times with stuff, players end up losing money on trades. Like, there's no way around it. You've got costs involved in this, and that's kind of the tough part of it too, because you take into the family account of it, then you take into the, you think you've done things right, and your question is, what did I do wrong? And no, you were great, you did everything right. Well, I mean, that's fine, but when you're losing $5-10 grand or whatever out the door, it's really a kick in the pants sometimes,
So is it harder to deal with now that you're mid-30s than it was when you were mid-20s?
Yeah, no question. I mean, when I was mid-20s, the thing was, this is only the second time I've been traded. And traded's a whole different ballgame than just being called up and sent down. And when you go up and down with teams, generally especially for someone like me who's fallen into a number 3 role as a goaltender, you usually have a sunset date on things. You know when they're going to end. This player's out a week, he's out a month, he's out however amount of time, and you can kind of plan for that to a certain extent. And obviously things can always change. But this year was really interesting. It was open-ended with Mike Condon, and it just kept going. And then it just, progressed to what it's been. So being traded though, it's a whole different ballgame with it. And it's hard to be prepared for that anyway, right? When it just comes up on you. And, it's just, as I was told repeatedly, it's a business. So it is a business, and kind of get used to it, I guess.
We're going to get into the hockey side of things and the gear and everything that involves being a goaltender. And your story is fascinating because you're so much like us. But just on the side of keeping track of things, how much do you follow what's going on around the National Hockey League or the American Hockey League to try and have some kind of heads up yourself to know what's happening and where you might end up?
I'm pretty aware of it. I mean, I don't sit down and watch NHL Network every moment of the day or really watch a lot of hockey, but I'm pretty in tune to all, like, let's say, transactions and things like that. And so, I mean, I think to me that's important because you kind of need to have a heads up just on the lay of the land, what's going on with teams. And for instance, with me going on waivers, who you might potentially be going to, or, even around the time I got traded, thinking about, what teams may be looking for somebody. Like, you kind of have to have a certain sense of what's going on. So, if something does happen, you can be aware of it, and then when you walk into a scenario, kind of have an idea of what's been going on with that team, what to expect, who you can lean on.
Yeah, I'd imagine that's kind of like free agency for you too, right? You got to look at depth charts and what's going on. But to switch back, the other part of changing all these teams over these years to me is goalie coaches. You've had so many different voices, at times within the same organization, within the same year, from the NHL to the AHL. Can you, some of the highlights? I mean, Allaire, Korn, Clark. I mean, to me, those are the first three that should go in the Hall of Fame. What are some of the highlights for goalie coaches over the years? And how do you manage that? How do you manage your game when there's so many different voices maybe bringing in things that, hey, try this, try that?
Oh, Kevin, that's an amazing point, and it's something that I've been incredibly fortunate with that. I mean, I could make a list of 20 goalie coaches, and I've hit really, like you say, all the big names in this. And like you said, Mitch Korn really set me down the right path in the first place. And from there on forward, all the other guys I've worked with, Allaire, Clark, I mean, I could just keep going with this. I worked with Jacques Caron, Chris Terreri, Rick Wamsley, Cap Carey, Lee. I mean, there's been so many. Pierre Gru has been really important to me. David Alexander. I mean, now I've got Kim Dillabaugh. I've had Alfie Michaud. Just a massive amount, and I'm going to forget people doing this, and I feel bad about that. But I think that what it's done is it's allowed me to see so many different perspectives of the position that it's let me develop my game within those parameters and really find what works best for me. And I didn't mention Jim Bedard. I have to mention Jim Bedard because we had an unbelievable year last year, going to the Calder Cup finals with Texas. And but Mitch is really the person who set me down the right path. When Nashville drafted me, the first thing Mitch did was sit me down and he goes, "Mike, you're a big man, but you can't skate." And so I'm first off, like, guys, I'm 6'2", 190, which now I might even be below the average in the NHL. So when I was drafted in 2002, when half these kids were just being born that are coming in the league, it seems like, but when I was drafted, I was a big guy who could handle the puck. And now everybody can handle the puck, and I'm average size. So I've had to keep improving everything else, right? And so Mitch sent me to a guy named Chris Economo, who has worked behind the scenes with a lot of people, and has kind of gone under the radar with it. You know, along the way, myself, Ty Conklin, he's worked with Montoya Turco, Jordan Siglet, and I trained together with them. We were training mates for years, and now Phoenix Copley and Parker Milner and other guys go to Econ, and he's based out of Philadelphia. And between Mitch and Econ, that really is what kind of gave me the foundation. And then moving forward, incorporating things from other guys along the way, footwork with Allaire, post work with Clark, on down the list of things.
As you said, different voices. I think when you get older, you probably trust what your game is. Like, you're able to sort of know. I would imagine it's easier to know what your foundation is as different guys tried to add different pieces. Was it harder earlier on? I've had guys that get run around a little bit to the point where they're changing things to keep the goalie coach happy without being sure that it's the right thing for their game. What kind of a challenge is that, especially as a younger goalie?
Yeah, I mean, I think now, people know what they're getting with me. It's pretty, my game's pretty well established, right? And so there's always tweaks and modifications, and I'm constantly searching for that feedback. And it doesn't matter whether I've been working with a guy for a week, like I have Kim Dillabaugh now, or if I'd been with Pierre Gru for over a year and a half that we'd worked together. I want that feedback. I want to know what I can do different or tweak or improve. But when you're young, you're very much in the goalie coach's hands, especially you see this with guys who come into an organization off an entry-level contract, and they're very much molded by the person they're working with. And I can really only think of one time that I ran into somebody who tried to change my game in a way that may not have been beneficial to me. And I went along with it. I fought through it. I tried not to be combative. I tried to learn from what I was doing. But then again, I think what I was doing there, it probably took me another year or two to truly become comfortable with my game again and play the way that I felt was best for what I brought to the table as an athlete.
Having been through that with so many people, we're talking about an adult here. What would you say to a youngster who's facing similar situations, a kid who might be 10, 12, 14 years old, and he's dealing with maybe a team goalie coach and a private goalie coach? Gosh, I've even heard of private goalie coaches who tell kids, "You're only allowed to work with me, and don't you dare go see anybody else." What advice do you have for youngsters dealing with all this?
It's a knife fight out there, isn't it? I mean, it's sad to me that it's become that, because you look at how well like Europe does things, where they have goalie coaching throughout the system and you don't have to worry about territorial stuff. Whereas in North America, it's a capitalistic free for all. But that's just reality. I think the best advice I can give for somebody is that it kind of goes back to what Mitch and I would talk about, Mitch Korn. And at one point, I remember Mitch saying to me, Mike, you can't fight City Hall. And, and he's dead on, and he's right. I mean, whoever you're working with essentially is your boss. And if you want to last in this game, you got to learn how to work for people. And you got to learn that even if you don't agree with everything they're doing, even if you don't agree with their methods, there's something that they're teaching that you can take from that, and you can learn and you can mold and use it the way you can. And you've got to find that, and you've got to find a way to be happy with one another and work together and try to come to conclusions.
Let's switch it over to gear here real quick, Mike. Now, I think Hutch was telling us earlier, you wrote an article for us on In Goal that sort of walked us through your whole setup. It was one of the earliest pieces we got contributions from a pro, and I believe it's still one of the all-time most read articles. And when I say the history of In Goal, that's now 10 years and what, Hutch? How many million hits? And yours is still number one all time. So fascination with gear, I think, drives a lot of us to the position, but being meticulous with it as a pro, and I've seen both sides of it, especially kids nowadays that sometimes don't even look like or seem like they know why they wear certain things. Like, how important is it to have your setup dialed in?
It's essential for me. I mean, those are my tools of the trade. And I think if you look at that article, how much I've changed my gear even since then. I can't remember whether that was 2010 or 2011, whenever it was. My gear has changed a whole lot. Not little, my pants are pretty much the same. Glove and blocker haven't changed a lot, but especially the pads, going to a 2S pad with Bauer, which at the time when it came out was a 1S, and it was so futuristic and different. And I've always been somebody, though, that's willing to try things that are innovative right out of the box. Like, I want the lightest thing I can get, the most innovative. I'll try it. If I don't like it, that's one thing. But like when I got the 1S pads and everything was Velcro and it fit tight to my leg and it was completely foreign. I remember the first time I wore it, I went, well, this feels different, but I can see the potential benefits. And I knew that I was going to probably need at least a week or two to kind of figure it out, but I could see why. I could see why this was going to be better. So I went for it. And I'm really in tune with stuff. Like, I'll look at other people's gear and I'll look at it and say, why on earth is this guy doing this? And it like good instances, if it's my goalie partner, and especially being an older guy, once I get comfortable with him after a while, I'll ask him little questions like, well, why are you doing that? Well, why do you have this redundant strap? And why do you have your skate that's doing nothing other than potentially allowing you to step on it? There's all these little things that I love to kind of needle the guys about. And then when I see little changes that they like, let's say they ditched a strap or they changed the way that they set something up, it feels like a little victory for me, because I feel like I'm trying to modernize it in some way. But I'll give you a great example of that. Like, the way people wear masks, you'll see guys, and I talk to this about Gary Warwick, who makes my masks all the time, how guys, you'll see them looking almost through the chin of the helmet because it doesn't fit them properly. And, well, why are you doing that? Well, I don't know. I think this is what they gave me in junior. It's what I like. And no, it's not what you like. It's just what you've had, and you feel comfortable, and you haven't been willing to try something different and just get something that fits properly. Like, your eyes should be looking through the holes of the cage, not into a chin cup. And like Gary Warwick was telling me, he gets chin cups that have been chewed on. I mean, first of all, that's gross. It's foam. Yeah. But second, that just shows that it doesn't fit you, So, man, I know that gear is the reason why so many of us become goalies, but it's also mind blowing that over time, some people lose that, and it's just kind of give me whatever I can play. And I think that you can exploit so many areas of your game with your gear to improve it if you're just willing to experiment a little bit.
Is there a storage locker somewhere, Mike, with about 75 pairs of gear from your career?
No, just jerseys. Jerseys, I have an entire storage. No, that's not true. I've got so many jerseys at this point, though, that I've either had to buy or find that I am starting to wonder what to do and where to put them. But I tend to get rid of my gear. I've hung on to a couple sets. I've got my college Bauer Reactor 5 set that I paid tribute to last year with Dallas, which was really cool. And there might be something coming down the line here a little bit, kind of insider info.
The tease.
Love it.
Geez, but so that I kept one of those. I kept my first NHL set from Tampa Bay, and I have all my masks. But the rest of the gear, what I end up doing with it usually is that I don't want to just sell the stuff. I get it for free anyway. The team pays for it, and to me, if I'm going to get rid of it, I like to ask whoever I'm giving it to make a donation to an animal shelter that we got our dog from. I think it's a good way to do things. I wouldn't feel right taking the money myself, but then again, it does have value. So it's a win-win for me if we can, funnel some money into a good place with that.
And the dog's name, of course, is Bauer.
Yeah. So thankfully, Bauer's been good to me. The dog's been good to me. But that dog's seen a lot, man. He's put some miles on, and he's been all over North America. He was, it's like minus 30 outside today. The poor guy's arthritic, so he's getting up there. But Texas was good for him last year in his joints.
I'm so old though. My neighbor's dog at the cottage is named Cooper. So,
well, I wore Cooper pads, guys. Like I'm a relic enough that I know those days where I had Cooper and Coho and all the old names.
Well, I was gonna say, when we talk gear with you, Mike, we can really talk. I mean, I don't know if you heard last week's, we had Sonia DiBiase, and she went back to like the era of deer hair and stuffing pads and walked us through how that changed. We can almost have not quite the same conversation, but like you have seen massive changes. We talked during when Bauer came out with the pads about like just having fun with those hot rebounds and how that's changed the game. And I can't remember who was in here the other day. It was Linus Ullmark. How that's why he switched, because he couldn't believe how hot these rebounds were, and to him that was an advantage. What's the biggest innovation you've seen? Maybe not throughout your career because it's a long time, but last couple of years or just overall, what's the biggest change in equipment?
Oh man, there's been so many monumental shifts, especially for somebody that's from my era. Like I did start out with deer hair pads, and like my dad and I would carve my pads apart to try to make them better, taking padding out, moving it around, just moving straps. We were really creative with stuff to try to get it to work. And now you can get it all customized from the factory to the way you like it, which helps. But I don't know. I mean, pads have changed. They've gotten so much lighter, but I think first and foremost, when the pads started to rotate properly on your leg, and so you didn't have to wear them so loose that they were falling off like Patty Lalime used to when they were, drooping to the ice. Now you can wear them pretty tight to your leg with the elastic strapping, and they still rotate into the butterfly. So that functionally is probably the biggest change. It's allowed us to play different with the knee stacks. We can slide on our knees, power push, do everything so different than we used to. But I think truly, in terms of technical innovation, I think the skates have just been night and day from when we started. And you look at what all the companies are doing now with, it looks weird to see a cowling now. And 3 years ago, everybody still had cowlings. That's rapid. That's a really quick change. And so they're stiffer, they're more responsive, they're better attack angle. It just checks all those boxes. And I think that's allowed us to become so much more mobile, not just on our feet, but on our knees, the way we power push, the way we integrate with our posts. So from a tech standpoint, I think that, and then from a functional standpoint, really just the way the pads have been able to seal the ice over the years has changed.
Can you talk about your dad and just his influence on you? It sounds like he was really involved, and nowadays it's 50-50 whether parents will even let their kids play goals. So I'm just curious about that relationship.
Oh man, my dad's the greatest. And I'll tell you what the best part is, that he's 68 going on 69. I'm 35. And in the summer we can play on a line together. I play forward with him. Yeah. And it's the greatest thing in the world for me to be able to play hockey with my dad. And, he's also the most humble guy I ever known. Like, he would come to the rink for my games and he'd get a pack of M&Ms and he'd go hang out in the corner as far away from the rest of the parents as he possibly could. And then we'd drive home and maybe we'd talk about the game, maybe not. Just, he was happy that I was having fun. And that's all that mattered to me. And my grandpa was really, really important with this too. He was a founding father of hockey in St. Louis, where I came from, and being in the first wave of guys out of St. Louis, the NHL. If you'd told my grandpa in the 50s, when he pretty much started hockey with about a dozen other guys there, that we'd had 24 NHL players, that Brandon Bollig had lifted the Stanley Cup, man, he'd be, And so my dad was on the first youth hockey team in St. Louis. 11 years old, Steinberg Ice Rink, 1961. Got a picture of it floating on my Twitter page right now. He was really important, and he wasn't a goaltender. He played forward, played defense, but I think over the years, like what helped him help me the most is that my dad was such a tinkerer, and he was an auto racer. And so you're always looking for an advantage. You're looking for anything that you can find to beat the competition. And to me, that was gear. I was always looking for something I could have better or make myself bigger. And my dad molded up Kevlar pieces and laid Kevlar to make pieces to add on to my arm and chest in college, so I could look like the Michelin Man out there, and nobody's policing this stuff in college. You're never getting checked for size there. So we're like, let's go for it. And so we did. I came home from break one year and we started laying up Kevlar, putting padding on it. And I looked a lot bigger when I showed up. So it worked, obviously. But I think that's been the biggest influence on me, is just being willing to try new things and try to always improve your craft.
Your girls, if you had to pick one sport for them, would they be driving a race car or playing goal?
I wouldn't want to. I mean, racing's really cool, but it's a massively expensive sport. I mean, people think hockey's expensive. If you want to go racing and make it, I mean, you got to raise a budget to. If you want to even do AA level racing, which is Pro Mazda in the U.S., I mean, you got to have a $750,000 budget. Good luck trying to find that, right? So I don't know. If my girls want to play hockey, that's fantastic. And if they want to be goalies, I'm cool with it. But my wife right now considers that the ultimate betrayal, because she's had to deal with me for so long doing this. So we'll see how that goes. But really, we're going to support them no matter what they want to do. And it would be really cool. I have 2 daughters. I don't have a son, and whatever my daughters want to do, I'm all in. I just like seeing them smile and have fun.
What about you, Mike? What's when? Not saying now. I'm saying when that time comes that
the next jersey
push me out the door.
And hey, I've thought of 4 different jobs that you could do since we've had this conversation. I think gear consultant for these kids who don't know how to set up their equipment would be a start. What do you think though? Like, what is the next step? I mean, you could be we've seen your cooking. We've seen you could be a chef. You could be in the industry as a goalie coach. You could be so many different things you could do. Do you want to stay in the game? What's the plan?
I think what you've said has kind of been my problem almost too, is that I don't have a clear-cut path. And if you'd have told me asked me 10 years ago what I was going to do when I was done, I could have told you immediately, because I would have only been 4 years out of school. I have an economics degree. I interned for 3 years with what's now, a guy that works with Raymond James with investments. And I could have easily done that, and I still could do that. So that's kind of my ultimate fallback, is that I've got a couple of things that I've maintained some closeness to over the years. But really, I mean, after 14 years in the game and however much longer it'll be, do I really want to walk away, throw that all out the window and start new? Part of that's really appealing to me, because I could just live in one place and be a normal human being and do everything else. But man, I still love this sport, and it almost feels like I should at least explore every avenue with it, and I've always felt a calling to broadcasting. I felt a kinship with those guys right away, because they're such curious people that enjoy conversation, that like to bring the stars out of the game and tell their story. And especially the guys that are really positive and do it in a nice way. That would be the ultimate for me, really. If I could choose anything, I'd love to do that. But it's hard to get those jobs. There's not many of them, and you've got to be good at it. And I don't have a whole lot of training with it, other than screwing around trying to interview people and doing a podcast for St. Lawrence University, a St. Lawrence hockey podcast. I've started doing that this year, and I'll probably be launching my own one in the spring eventually. But I don't know. If I was going to be a goalie coach, it would have to be the perfect scenario, because I don't really see myself enjoying that as much as other things. But then again, if it was the right team, the right setup, it's something I would consider. And it's kind of the same way with management. I think I'd be good at that, but yet again, you see the drawbacks to it too. It's a tough thing to do. I mean, you really have to be secretive and clandestine. And I don't know, man. I'll be honest with you, I've been bit a few times, and I'm not sure that I could be the guy doing the biting. You know what I mean? So we'll see. I truly don't know, but I'm I hope when the time comes that maybe a clear path emerges kind of quickly. And if it doesn't, maybe I'll take a couple of months off and just be a dad for a little bit.
Nothing wrong with that. Before we let you go, you had a partnership with Craig Anderson and then a partnership with Carter Hart. The differences between managing those two relationships back-to-back seamlessly.
I mean, two very different people in life, in the way they play, all that stuff. And, with Craig, it was, Craig's a clear-cut number one goaltender in this league. He's established. He's somebody who's done it for so long. And, we've kind of come up. I mean, obviously my career path's been very different, but we're still kind of the same era, right? He's 37, I'm 35. We have a lot of things in common. We both could still make a skate save if we wanted to. We both can two-pad stack jammer, him probably more effectively than me. But we had those things in common. We also had a racing background. My dad raced cars. His dad raced cars. So we had a lot of stuff to talk about that wasn't hockey, which was great. And we're both guys that know how to manage the game enough now that we can come in between periods and just totally let the game go for a little while. Whereas Carter, I mean, just a massively talented young professional. I mean, this kid he's a real deal and total package. Great kid. I've only known him for 2 weeks, but you can just tell these things right away. He's so meticulous in how he prepares for things. But you also have to manage it differently. Like he's very serious during the game. I can tell that he has his routines and it's nothing that I would ever want to step on. And so with someone like him, you generally will let them come to you if they have something that they'd want to talk about, versus if Craig came to the bench, I could make fun of somebody falling at the other end and we could laugh about it mid game and it wouldn't faze them, and I would never do that with Carter or somebody else who approaches the game very differently and is really finding their own path right now.
We appreciate your time. I know you're on the 5-day break, and you've been squeezed with the family experiences and the exposure, and we thank them as well as Rachel and the comments that she shared. Tell her to continue to do that because it's something that gives everybody a look behind the curtain. But appreciate it, and good luck the rest of this year.
I will. I was a blast having me on, and I mean, I know let's face it. I mean, we've been through a decent amount this year and we realize how fortunate we are with everything and how in the grand scheme of things, it pales in comparison to what a lot of people face. But it is important for people to understand that it's not all bunnies and rainbows all the time. And it's not just because you get paid a lot that can make you happy. And, look around the league with, guys that have been struggling at times. Happiness is important no matter what your bank account looks like. And that's first and foremost in life. And people have to remember that we're all human too. And we're just doing the best job that we can. So thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for everything over the years.
Priorities and passion. Mike has both. You don't have to be somebody that goes out and scrapes a crease before the start of every period to really admire what he's going through and how he's handled it. Simply put, as a father, as a husband, as a teammate, and of course, as a goaltender, he has everything lined up perfectly. Look, he's in his mid-30s, and he's still playing this game, and he's excelling, having gone to the championship series of the American Hockey League the last 2 years. And he's also a very good follow on Twitter, at Mike McKenna 56 for the entertainment value. Now to a conversation that Mike himself is excited about. You ever wonder what goes into designing your equipment? I'm not talking about the foams, the composites, the shape of a mask, but rather the graphics, what the shooter looks at, or maybe more importantly, what makes you want to wear a certain line. We dive into that, plus what Matt from Vintage Goalie is doing now on the apparel side of things, here on In Goal Radio. In Goal Radio takes you around the world of hockey and inside the crease, talking about goal equipment, goaltending instruction, goaltending styles, pros and amateurs, and of course, the style of goaltenders. That can mean a whole bunch of different things, including what we wear. The first two professional goaltenders that In Goal Radio has spoken with in this podcast have both been modeling vintage goalie gear. And here's Matt from Vintage to join Darren Millard, Kevin Woodley, and David Hutchinson. And just give us your background, Matt. Congratulations on the vintage line, and just give us an idea of where this whole thing came from.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, guys. It goes back to 2007 when I landed my ultimate dream job. My title was goalie developer, and that was at iTech. And while I was there, I was developing the goalie equipment line. So I was strictly on the protective, so chest pad, pants, masks, and block catch and pads. And it was great because iTech being a small company, you get to wear a lot of hats. So I got to touch a lot of different parts of the products. I spent a lot of time on the masks, the designs specifically. iTech prided themselves on having a large variety of mask designs. So I designed a lot of those, the graphics. I did a lot of the cosmetic design, so the pad graphics for iTech at the time. And then in 2009, a couple of years later, I worked for Nike Bauer, and that was a great opportunity as well. And what was great about Nike Bauer is they had an R&D facility up in St. Jerome, and for a good 2.5 years there, I spent a majority of my time developing the goalie masks. So the Enemy 3 and the Enemy 5 were my projects. I was one of the lead developers on those. So involved right with the liners, the shell, cage, and obviously working on the graphic designs. And one little plug there, my buddy Dave Gunnarsson, you guys know him as Dave Art. He's done a lot of work for Bauer in the past, and that's how I got to know him as well.
So hold on. iTech 2007, like, are we talking X-Wing here?
Yes, sir. Yeah, when I was there, X-Wing was huge. It just Prodigy 2 was there, and when I started, the RX series had just launched. Okay,
now the X-Wing, you got to fit like the graphic. What's the thought there? Because that thing was popular at the time. That was huge.
It was. I can't take any credit for that pad graphic. That was already baked by the time I got there. But absolutely, there are a number of guys in that line. I know Martin Gerber was a big X-Wing guy, and there was a few others for sure.
And Gerber also an Enemy guy, if I'm not mistaken. Were you behind the Darth Vader mask?
No, but I did work with Dave Gunnarsson on that one, and that was a ton of fun. I remember, there was a bit of hype around it. We were wanting to create some buzz, and that definitely got a lot of attention. That was a lot of fun.
I'm curious when it comes to the design of the goal pad, and we had Sonia DiBiase last week discussing the contents of the inside of the pad. You're talking what we see in the graphic design, and one thing that keeps coming up over and over is color scheme. What do you know about the optics, about what a shooter wants to look at, and how does that play into a pad design and the face that you're looking at?
Sure, great question. And there's a lot of theories out there. Some people are convinced that absolutely the optics do play into it. I personally don't believe it. I personally think a lot of it comes down to personal preference, visual appeal. But in terms of whether the pad is all white or all dark, or if the graphic is mesmerizing, I personally don't really buy into that theory.
So you've been hanging out with Mike McKenna then recently?
Yes, sir. Yeah, Mike's a real good guy.
I was gonna say he likes that theory too. He doesn't believe that the all dark is a bad thing. It sounds like you're on the same page there.
Yeah, 100%.
So what do you think of when you design the front of a goal pad? When you're trying to come up with a graphic?
Being a graphic designer, a lot of it is balance. I've seen some designs in the past where the graphic maybe comes across as top heavy. I've seen designs where a lot of the action is at the bottom near the boot. So for me personally, it's all about having the right, graphics, the right designs in the right places, and that just create that visual appeal. Brian's does a real nice job of certain highlights. Like they'll have a number of zones, and that's the other thing too. Zones really play into it. You can really, get creative, get custom. Everybody's set looks a little bit different from one another, and Brian's, just being one example, does a good job of that.
I get scared when I start throwing out brands or lines of gear with Woodley and Hutch, because they're the geniuses. They're my Yodas when it comes to this stuff. But when you mentioned Bauer and iTech, was that the 961? Is that where? Okay, because that was my first favorite mold.
Yeah, the 960. The 960 was iTech's Cadillac, and still today is quite popular for sure.
What went into that? What makes that one the Cadillac?
I think it's because at the time, it was so popular in the league. I mean, there were so many guys wearing it, and it's a clean design. It's not bulky. It's streamlined. It's got the right amount of vent holes. I mean, there's a lot of things. And for a lot of people, goalies, like, we all kind of have our own thing, but that one sort of checked a lot of the boxes in my mind.
Now, what about fit? Because that's the one thing I would say, as much as the 960 and 961 were the early Cadillacs and everyone jumped on them, I think there was we went for a run there where guys bought them, but they didn't necessarily fit them. Ironically enough, McKenna talks about it in this issue of the podcast where sometimes you wear a mask because you think it is the best one, but if it doesn't fit you properly, that's an issue. So what kind of issues, how did you solve them with fit at the pro level? And I know this is since you've probably passed on, but I got to give all the companies credit, Bauer, CCM, expanding the fit lines since the original 960 and 961. So it's not one size fit all at retail level, to me, has been a massive improvement for sight lines and safety of goaltenders everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Is this Kevin?
Yep.
Okay, Kevin. I was fortunate when I worked on the NME 3 and NME 5. So that was more of at the retail level. That line. What was nice about it is it took the same look and feel as the 960. But that one there, we spent a ton of time getting the fit right. I mean, I can remember having a goalie bag full of NME 3s with different types of foams, and just going to arenas and having kids try these things on, and making sure you get the fit right. And I'll tell you, when you do that enough times and you fit enough people, you'll cross off a lot of discrepancies, and you'll get it pretty close. So for me, it was just, making sure you spent the right amount of time with the right amount of people and the right amount of foams to get it right.
Okay, so now we're into an era where at retail, there are different options. There are different sizes. There are different foams. There are different shells. There are different shapes. As a guy who's been there in that process, fitting different goalies, what should parents be looking for, or young goaltenders be looking for when they walk into the store? Like, what determines a good fitting mask? Because if there's one thing I've learned talking to mask makers over the years, fit is paramount to safety. So what do you look for when you slap that thing on your head, or you slap it on your kid's head in the store, that quantifies or qualifies a good fit?
Sure. Well, a lot of it comes down to, the strapping system. So different manufacturers, I can't speak for all of them, and I've been out of it for a while, but the moment you put the mask on, if it starts to be too front heavy, it's going to fall down the forehead. You got to go up, make sure that all your straps are in the right place. The back plate's important too. The back plate, you can't have too much gap around the perimeter of the back plate. If so, you got to tighten that thing up, or it's just maybe not the right fit. Maybe the person's head is too large. Your sight lines, the forehead has to be just coming across your mid brow. And then a lot of it is just comfort. Like if there's pain points, there's areas where it's not comfortable. Those are sort of the obvious ones. But having the strapping system in properly, the back plate's important, making sure it's all closed off right, and then just ultimately comfort and gaps. Like if there's big gaps, they have to be identified for sure.
Foam as well.
Well, the liner for sure, and a lot of these masks now come with sweat bands, so that plays a part. But foam is important for sure.
It's Hutch here, Matt, and I was just going to say we've been talking about the more modern feel of the game here in terms of the gear and the design, but you decided somewhere along the line to take it back a little and pay tribute to vintage goaltenders from the past. Where's that interest from?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from when I was a kid. I think, probably you guys too, if you were to take a couple of minutes and talk about who that first goalie was in the league that spoke to you. And for me, it was, the mask, the fearless warrior. I mean, these guys were unstoppable. Nothing seemed to rattle them. And there's a few goalies that, because I get asked a lot, who's my favorite goalie? And I don't really have a favorite, but there are a lot who really influenced me at different times in my life. I think of Kelly Rudy, Grant Fuhr, John Casey, Tim Shovelday. I mean, the list goes on. I'm 43, so I remember the early 80s through the 90s. And then, I've just always, I guess, and not to sound dramatic, but life goes fast, and I find players come into the leagues, we're talking goalies here, and they retire, and you don't hear from them anymore. You don't know where they are, what they're up to, and I think that's a shame, and I feel it's almost an obligation of mine to keep those stories alive and those images and the gear they wore, some of their records, and they weren't all cup winners. When I was young, I was a big fan of a lot of the backups. I'd love to see the backup get the nod and get the win, and even maybe get the nod for the next game. So for me, it's I just want to keep those stories at the surface, because unfortunately, a lot of these guys, when they leave the game, you don't hear much about them anymore.
So you built a clothing line around your desire to pay tribute to the vintage guys of the past, and it's really, I don't want to say it's an overnight success, because it's probably a 5 or 6 year overnight success, and we're seeing guys in the pros wearing it all the time. So how has that happened? How do you think it's exploded, and how is it that you've been able to put your stuff in the hands of so many guys in the show?
I think a lot of it's just become I've just been myself. You know what? I like to talk to people. I like to be real. I love to hear their stories. That to me is important. I love it when guys tag me, when they send me photos of their gear, and they share stories from when they were a kid. Like I didn't play when I was little. Unfortunately, 4 kids in the family. My parents both worked. We didn't have the money for that. So I was a late bloomer. But so when I see these guys sending me pictures from when they were young, and I get a real kick out of that. And so it's the human side of it, I guess, is the best way to put it. That's what I enjoy the most. And maybe just my background in design. I really put my heart into it. My posts that I put up on social media, I try to do the best I can with the time that I have. And as far as the pros go, they've been wonderful. I've never once asked any one of them to take a picture of themselves and post it. I don't believe in forcing that on anybody. If they want to wear it, great. But that's up to them. And if they want to share it, I mean, I'm humbled by it. Every time I see that out there, I'm humbled, and really, truthfully, it's sort of my way of just saying thanks. Thanks to them for what they've done to the league, and to so many kids. They've been role models, etc. I'm humbled by it.
I'm trying to get the towel back on the backup goaltenders. That's a theme of this podcast. Can you come up with something for me on that?
Yes, sir. I'm with you on that one. Absolutely. Man, I miss that. I collect cards, and a lot of the cards that I post, there's so many great details in those old cards, and that being one of them. Miss that.
If I ever see a T-shirt of yours doing that, I'm going to buy 50 of them. I'm going to make Hutch and Woodley pay for it, though.
Oh, there's a few of them. I got some neat ideas coming out this year, some new ones coming out, and guys all the time are throwing their ideas at me for different themes. I got to do a toe save one. I'm sure there's a buyer out there for that too. And the 2-pad stack seems to be, I think that's probably the one I sell the most of, that one. So that's been fun. Yeah.
You have been hanging out with McKenna, because he's already delivered the toe-up skate save and warm-ups to appease a buddy, and he's going to be rolling out the backup towel for us next time he's on the ice. We're working on having that on camera as well. And I got to say, You know, we've let you down a little bit here. We had Mike wearing your hat during our interview earlier and didn't take a screen cap. And when Roberto got into the car with me and we ended up doing the podcast last week, he was wearing a Vintage Goalie hoodie. And I'm kind of like you. I don't like to, hey, how's it going? Let me take a photo of you and put it on social media. Not really my style. But now I feel like I've let you down because I didn't grab a picture of Roberto in that beautiful hoodie. It was a good look.
Oh, man, thank you very much. No, that's cool.
How do people get a hold of you, Matty?
So probably the best way is, probably not email, usually social media. So whether it's Twitter and Instagram are probably the fastest ways for me. And email, not so much.
What's the website?
Oh, it's vintagegoalie.ca.
Perfect.
The sad part for you is that, or it's actually a good part for you, but you're the youngest buck on this phone call, so Vintage doesn't quite answer it.
Are you serious? I am. I had no idea.
Oh, I got you by a decade.
I feel good today.
Yeah.
No kidding.
It's one of the great aspects of what we're doing here is just exploring the entire world of goaltending, and fashion and design are two of your bailiwicks, and you did it from the equipment side, and now you're doing it with closing our backs, and we appreciate what you're doing for the entire goalie community. Thanks.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thanks for having me on, guys. And listen, if any one of you guys are in the Ottawa area, I expect you to come by and we'll grab some wings.
Boy, we are owning the market on the old guys. That, with all due respect, Mike McKenna and Matt and Roberto Luongo last week, but we are just going back to our vintage eras. So Woodley, now that we've got the old guys taken care of and that crowd, give me a young guy that we can look forward to next week on In Goal Radio.
You mean before I go run my Epsom salt bath to
exactly
to ease my aching hips like an 80-year-old man or a 40-year-old goaltender? Isn't that how this works? I got to tell you, we do have we got a beauty coming up next week. Thatcher Demko, the Vancouver Canucks, sort of a loose transition from Roberto Luongo, the greatest Canuck goalie of all time, to a guy who a lot of people think might be the next great one for the Vancouver Canucks. And I got to be honest, to me, the chance to talk to Thatcher for all of us is, this isn't just about, a really good young goaltender. This is about a kid who shares the passion for the position that kind of has brought us all together. The first time I talked to him after he'd been drafted, he talked to me about a diary that he kept, sort of a little black book, for lack of a better term. He would watch NHL games on Game Center, and he would make notes on other goaltenders, how they played certain situations, and then try those things to see if they fit into his game. So he's from San Diego. He worked with goalie coaches all over the country when he used to travel for rep tournaments. He's told me he's got a ton of good stories about sort of that upbringing and how it made him who he is today. The passion for the position, I think, will come through when we have a chance to talk to him. And like I said, I'm just really looking forward to it because I think, like us, that passion runs deep.
Thatcher Demko, seriously, this is a guy that just broke John Garrett's record for starting his Canucks career 2-0.
Oh,
because Cheech always had
wins
that.
in a row.
I know. Cheech always said, "I own the record, or I'm tied with it for the record with 1-0." So he shattered that.
That's brilliant. And first off, I just got to say, you two cannot claim anything vintage. I've got you both by a decade, I think. I'm probably the only one on this podcast who's ever worn an actual fiberglass mask in competition.
And I consider myself better for not having done that.
Maybe that's why my memory is what it is. But no, I'm really looking forward to listening to Thatcher. We got to meet him the first time when he was at the Canucks development camp down at Shawnigan Lake, and fantastic stories. And it's great to see that he's moved to where he is and is going to be able to share it with our audience. But speaking of Kevin's hips, he's also had hip surgery too, hasn't he?
Yeah, there's a guy that went from college and succeeding in college, and unbelievable, with 0 degrees of internal rotation on one side of the hip. And, probably a good example for a lot of the people, much like Eric Comrie, who had, double hip surgery the year before his draft, that hip surgery is not the same as it used to be. This isn't a career ender. As a matter of fact, guys are having it preventatively now. So we can talk to Thatcher about that, about his experience recovering, and how about, like a lot of young kids who get it almost like a boutique surgery, frankly, at younger ages down in the States, about how it sort of frees up that range of motion in the hips for the butterfly.
That's terrifying to think. That's terrifying to think about kids doing it in advance, though. That's something we'll have to get into another time on the show.
Yeah, but what's really terrifying is hip replacement, and that's what I'm going to deal with, and that really is a career limiter. So
Yes.
that we'll save for another day. You know, when you mentioned Demko watching on Game Center and copying things, that's another sign that I'm old. I'm like, really? He grew up watching Game Center, and that's where he was stealing the highlights and the tips from. Whoa. I'm glad that I caught podcasting when I did, because waited a couple of years and it would have passed me by. Woodley, Hutch, another great episode, another an hour of fun, and look forward to next week with Thatcher.
Perfect. I'm going to go practice my kick saves and 2-pad stacks, both of which precede me.
We'll see you next week, boys.
In Goal Radio. Goalies, parents, make sure you tell your kids, keep your heel down and your toe up, your gloves up, and your stick on the ice and your crease clean. Have a good week.